Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Tundra Talk, featured on Lombardiave.com. For those of you listening who are unaware of what LombardiAvenue.com is, it's a news and opinion site brought to you by the Fansided Network, providing the latest Green Bay Packers news and views, and that's exactly what we plan on doing on this podcast. I am your host, Joe D'Aloisio, joined by fellow cheesehead Ralph Manzini. Ralph, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome, man. We're 2 days away from the opening game. I am pumped.
I mean, isn't that unbelievable? Speaking for myself, I thought this offseason was going to just be so long. And, there's nothing better than football. And that offseason just drags on and on. But here we are in September, and we're just days away from meaningful football.
Yeah, well, it seems to me like in recent years that the offseason has gotten just a little bit shorter just because of all the things that happen in between free agency and the draft, and then you have OTAs, and it just seems that it does get long in some of those months, like in May and maybe early June, late June. But overall, I think in recent years the off season has gotten a little shorter.
Absolutely.
In any event, man, I'm so glad that it's here now.
Absolutely, and we all know that the NFL tries to make a spectacle out of every little
Sure.
event possible. The NFL draft has completely changed and turned into this enormous event where they just continue to market their players, and they've done a great job at doing that. And as you said, the OTAs, the free agency period, there's nothing better than football, and quite frankly, there's nothing better than Green Bay Packers football. Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing about being a Green Bay Packers fan is in Green Bay, it's all about football. It's not about the glitz, it's not about the glamour, it's not about the cheerleaders. It's just about football. And that's why I've gravitated toward the Green Bay Packers, why I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. It's just, fans over there, that's all they do. They talk about football. They breathe football all year round. And I'm pretty much the same way. I mean, yeah, I dabble in baseball. I might watch one or two basketball games, but I'm always thinking football all year round. And being a Green Bay Packer fan, it means having that type of passion for the game of football. So, yeah, it's great being a Packers fan.
Now, Ralph, for those of you that don't know, for the listeners tuning in, where are you from?
Well, I am from New York City. I currently live in New York City, and I grew up watching the Jets as a child, as a teenager. But as I said, as I grew older, and as I got to, as I was exposed to a lot of the other teams, and I got to watch a lot more games and get familiar with, all the stars on the other teams, watching the entire, all the 32 organizations out there on television. I found myself rooting for the Packers, and I slowly but surely became a Packers fan.
Wow, what are the odds here? 2 Packer fans from New York. Now, have you had a chance to go out to Lambeau and check out the Packers at home?
I've been all over the Midwest, but I just haven't had a chance to go to Lambeau Field.
Oh, come on, Ralph.
Yeah,
that is so disappointing to hear.
I promise you, I will go there. I will be there next summer. I promise you.
Oh, you better catch a regular season game, too. I know they do a great job with the training camp and having, getting fans involved and meeting players, and it's just probably a great experience. I've yet to go out there for a summer. I've been lucky enough, though, to see 2 games, and, the game day experience is like none other.
I'm sure it is. I mean, you can make an argument that the Packers fan base is the best there is. There's no other fan base that compares to the Packers supporters, the cheeseheads out there.
Easily, well said. Well, there's a ton of news and notes to get to, so let's dive right into it. The 53-man roster officially announced this past Saturday, and easily the biggest surprise by far is the Packers' decision to cut ties with veteran guard Josh Sitton. Now, Ralph, what was your initial reaction to the news?
Well, just like a lot of other Packer fans, I was totally shocked. I did not see this coming. And to be quite honest with you, I did have a feeling that this was going to be Josh Sitton's last season because of all of those players on the offensive line who are going to have to be re-signed. But I thought that, Thompson was going to keep the group together, keep the band together, because, when you talk about offensive lines, it's not about having the best left tackle or the best center. It's about continuity. It's about guys having a certain type of chemistry with one another. It's about keeping the same group, the same core together on that offensive line. And I expected Sitton to be part of that group in 2016. So when I heard about this, I was just I was stunned. But and then like a lot of other people, I tried to kind of rationalize this decision, and the only thing I could come up with was the fact that I guess Ted Thompson had already made up his mind that he wasn't going to re-sign Josh Sitton next season. And then I heard rumblings about Sitton maybe wanting a new contract right now, right this minute. And Ted Thompson just, he didn't want to be pressured, and he wasn't going to re-sign him anyway. So he figured, why not just let him walk right now? And, then the other thing that you have to ask yourself is Ted Thompson, does he have any intentions of maybe, re-signing or giving David Bakhtiari an extension during the season? That could be something. That could be something that, that's in the works. And maybe that, the fact that they gave up on Sitton, that they let him walk, maybe that'll open up a little bit of cap money. So, but yeah, and it just, by the way, it just burns me that Sitton is now with the Chicago Bears. But it's business. It happens every year. So we can't get emotional about these things. This is what happens with a lot of teams, not just with the Packers.
Absolutely, and I felt the same exact way. I was shocked. I thought this came out of nowhere. There was no hint or signal that this could even have been a possibility. So when the news came out, similar to you and the rest of the fan base, I think it's safe to assume that we were all shocked. I think it played a toll on the locker room. I know some of Sitton's former players, when they addressed the media, they also were shocked and surprised, and they had no idea that it was coming. And that, to me, is very, not only surprising, but a little concerning that now, you have players coming out saying that nobody's safe. Not exactly the mentality, the thoughts that you want to be hearing heading right into the season.
No, it's not what you want to hear. And you would have to think that something went on there, as I mentioned before. Something went on with Sitton where, he made some type of demand, or he approached Ted Thompson about, being extended right now, and Thompson being perturbed or irritated by the whole thing. And this was just maybe like a reactionary move, to show Sitton that, he wasn't going to be pressured by his offensive guard, by his starting offensive guard. So, I definitely think something happened there behind the scenes, and that nobody really knows about.
I agree with that. I also do believe that, through the rumblings that Sitton wanted a contract extension, that it may have gotten personal between Sitton, between Ted Thompson in that meeting, in those meetings, and that ultimately led to that. As you said, Sitton, of course, signs with the Chicago Bears. Packers now, are kind of getting used to this. They saw this happen earlier on with Brett Favre going to the Vikings, which I think that stung a lot more than this move. But, there was definitely a market and a value out there. He inks a 3-year contract, nearly $22 million, 10 of it guaranteed. And, as you mentioned earlier, what's key about that offensive line and what you want to see with the offensive line is consistency and a group that's been together. Now Mike McCarthy announces that Lane Taylor will be the starting left guard, and he has huge shoes to fill. Luckily, he's surrounded by other veteran leaders on that line, but has very little game experience. What are you expecting from Lane Taylor?
I did see some improvement from him starting last season. As a matter of fact, he did start 2 games. He did fill in, and he didn't look terrible out there. He didn't look like a superstar, but he didn't look terrible out there. And the best part of his game is the fact that Lane Taylor is physical. He's physical, particularly in the running game. Now, as far as him being a pass blocker, that's probably something that he's going to have to work on. And as he gains more experience, as he continues playing week after week, it's something that hopefully he'll get better at. But I do think that the ground game shouldn't suffer with Lane Taylor in there, because he is a big, bruising, physical type of mauling blocker. So that's pretty much what I expect out of Taylor. I'm a little worried about his pass blocking, but as far as him being a run blocker, I'm pretty okay with it.
He'll have a tough first assignment with Malik Jackson. That should be interesting. And also, I look at it this way, that if there's one thing that is the Packer way, it's them always tending to move on and go younger, and they have no problems cutting that cord and going to the player with less experience. And they may have seen this coming. Taylor was supposed to be a free agent. They decided to re-up his contract, pretty much an insurance signing, knowing that at one point, with Sitton due, with Bakhtiari due, that somebody wasn't going to be there. So the fact that they signed them earlier this offseason shows that they wanted to keep him around for a reason.
And one other thing that came out of the mouth of Mike McCarthy when he was being interviewed recently, in the past couple of days, I should say, was the fact that he mentioned that when you evaluate players and you're trying to decide who to sign and who not to sign, the positions that they play, they affect greatly the whether or not the team is going to re-up them or not. And the fact that Sitton plays offensive guard probably hurt him as well, because let's face it, if you were to choose between having to re-sign your left tackle versus one of your offensive guards, about 10 times out of 10, if that left tackle is halfway decent, you're going to want to bring back that left tackle, just because it's much, much harder to get yourself a star left tackle than it is, a guard who you can plug in and it'll do the job for you. So I think that also hurt Josh Sitton as well, him playing the offensive guard position, which isn't very highly regarded when you compare it to, other positions such as cornerback, quarterback, wide receiver, and left tackle, pass rusher, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, absolutely. And if one thing, can we just debunk all of the other Packer fans here that, claim that this decision was made based on Sitton's health history? Now, I know he's had some back issues, but here's a guy who's, the last time he missed a regular season start was back in 2011. And even that year, he started in 14 regular season games. So, hearing about the back issues and his health, I think that's just out of bounds.
Yeah, and, the fact that he's 30 years old doesn't make him a spring chicken, but you would think that, the fact that he hasn't had any really debilitating injuries, you would think that he's got at least about 2 or 3 more years of quality play ahead of him. So, yeah, I don't buy anybody claiming any health issues or physical concerns with Josh Sitton. I think that had nothing to do with Ted Thompson moving on from him.
Now, moving on, but staying on the offensive side of the ball, the Packers also decided to go with 7 wide receivers on the 53-man roster, including, of course, Jordy Nelson, who will be making his return after tearing his ACL, missing all of last season. Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, Jeff Janis, Ty Montgomery, Jared Abbrederis, and the rookie Trevor Davis. Now, are you okay with keeping all 7? Are you okay with the 7 that they decided to go with?
Well, I expected them to keep 7 receivers just because they do have a wealth of young, talented wide receivers. And but the one player who I thought was going to make the final 53 wasn't Trevor Davis. It was going to be that number 7 receiver. I didn't think that was going to be Trevor Davis. I thought it was going to be Geronimo Allison. Allison is very tall, very long, great body control, 6'3.5". Tampa Bay native, just was terrific in the preseason. Both quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Callahan, were very impressed with the undrafted free agent rookie. I thought he was going to be the one who was going to make the team as that last receiver. But it just so happens that, Davis was the one who was actually drafted, and he comes with a lot of speed, and he also can contribute as a returner as well. I'm sure that had a big impact on the way things went. But luckily, the Packers were able to put Allison on the practice squad. Fortunately, nobody claimed him, so that's something that we can hopefully look forward to. Maybe next preseason we'll see Allison out there again, because I think this guy. I'm not saying he could be special, but I think he could be, maybe in time a very good wide receiver 3, somebody who could, make plays on the sidelines, run a lot of different routes. He can go deep, and even though he has only 4.6 speed, he's a long strider. So the further he goes downfield, the more ground he's going to cover, and the more difficult he's going to make it for defensive backs to defend him. So, yeah, am I surprised they kept 7 receivers? No, just surprised that they kept Davis over Allison.
I also agree with you there. I wasn't surprised that they kept 7. Like you mentioned, the wealth of wide receivers, it was really difficult, and that seemed like the narrative all camp of trying to narrow down who would make the cut. Now, I actually disagree, though. I thought that Trevor Davis was a lock, especially because of his special teams ability. I think it's safe to say we'll see him a lot in the punt return, kick return. I think they would rather have Davis back there rather than a Ty Montgomery, a Micah Hyde, someone who's going to be more readily involved in the offense. He has blazing speed. He showcased that speed, and he's got a knack for that for making big plays. I thought that the man out would have been Jeff Janis. Once he got hurt towards the end of camp, I thought that may have landed him maybe on IR, opened up another spot for somebody else. Similar to you, I also thought that Geronimo Allison would have made the roster. I would have loved to see him make the roster. A lot of, I honestly haven't heard a bad thing about Allison, and I'm glad that they were able to grab him and put him on that practice squad. But I'm also okay with the 7. I just rather have Allison in instead of Janis.
Yeah, well, I thought that they were going to keep Janis just because he's just a great gunner on special teams coverage. So they probably didn't have anybody, or maybe they thought they didn't have anybody that can do, the type of job that Janis does consistently in covering kicks. So, but yeah, I mean, Janis had a terrible preseason. I mean, he just he's dropping balls right and left, and then he gets himself injured, and I believe I'm not sure if he still has that club on his hand, and that's, probably going to prevent them from, performing as a pass catcher, at least in the early going. So, yeah, I mean, I agree that Janis probably deserves to be cut, but by the same token, he performs a pretty important and very specific role on special teams himself. So, that's the thing that fans always have to be reminded of is, don't just, look at those plays that they make on offense, a guy making a 70-yard play. It often comes down to how valuable is this player in terms of how many different roles he can perform. And if he plays an important special teams role, then oftentimes that is going to save him a roster spot. And that's exactly what happened with Janis. And it's also what happened with Davis as well. So there you have it. We got our 7 receivers. So hopefully we can get some healthy seasons from Jared Abbrederis and from Ty Montgomery. And hopefully we'll see a bounce-back season from Devontae Adams as well.
Of course, and I mean, we can't not discuss the return of Jordy Nelson here. What do you expect from Jordy coming back from that ACL injury?
I'm sort of conflicted just because I'm conflicted as to how much time he's going to get in the early going. He didn't play at all in the preseason. He did get a chance to practice, to put in a few full practices with Aaron Rodgers and company. So that's reassuring. But I kind of have a feeling that maybe in the early going, at least in week one, they're probably going to limit his reps. So he might not be out there for, let's just say the Packers run 75 plays or 70 plays. There's a good chance that he'll probably not be out there for all of those 70 or 75 plays. Maybe they'll ease him in, they'll limit him. So that's what I expect, at least in the early going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find it very hard to believe that we'll see a full, despite the reports indicating that, Nelson is ready to play and we'll see him out on the field. I just find it very hard to believe that we'll see Jordy Nelson in full effect early on in the season. They'll want to work him up back into game speed, etc., so that later in the season he could hopefully be that threat. It's obviously a difficult injury to come back from. We don't know. There's no guarantee that we see, vintage Jordy Nelson here. But I can confidently say with the other wide receivers that make up this core, they'll pick up the slack if Jordy cannot play at his high standard.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm just hoping that we can get a couple of healthy seasons out of Montgomery and Abbrederis. Abbrederis in particular is somebody who he's been around for about 3 years, and to me, he seems like he's an injury waiting to happen. But when he's out there, he's productive. He's a smooth route runner. He runs to the right spots. Aaron Rodgers loves throwing the ball to him. And he's pretty good on special teams, too, in terms of returning punts as well. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed with Jared Abbrederis.
Absolutely. Now, of course, we know we're all counting down till Sunday, Week 1. The Packers head to Florida to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I definitely think this game may be a lot closer than most expect. Ralph, let me hear your game prediction.
Well, I think that the Packers, I want them to jump out early and just score like a couple of quick touchdowns against Jacksonville, get them out of their game plan. I don't want to see Jacksonville use a lot of the ground game. They have Chris Ivory and TJ Yeldon. I want the Packers to force Blake Bortles to air it out, because the more he throws the ball, the bigger chance he'll have of making mistakes. He's still not the complete package. He's still developing. He's still a young quarterback. And if we can force him into, throwing a couple of picks, 2 or 3 interceptions, then I think that the Packers can win this game by about, I would say, 10 to 15 points. But my prediction is going to be Packers 30, Jacksonville 20. Now, I know that the Jaguars have gotten a lot better on the defensive side of the ball, but a lot of those new additions, they're very young, and it might take them a while for them to gel. So I know the Jaguars have had their issues covering the tight end, so I think Jared Cook, he could be on his way to a nice Packers debut. And I also look for Randall Cobb to put up some numbers as well. Now that Jordy Nelson's back out there and Jared Cook is out there, I think that the Packers will be able to stretch the field, which is going to leave a lot of openings underneath for Mr. Randall Cobb. So I expect the Packers to win this game. I think they're the better team. Jacksonville, they can do some things. They have Allen Robinson out there, who's an absolute stud. But at the end of the day, not a big Blake Bortles fan. He could put up numbers, but he'll also make a lot of mistakes. And I can definitely see that happening.
I am definitely with you. Like I said before, I think the Packers will be able to win and take down the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm expecting a closer game in the first half, and then the Packers just completely unleashing Aaron Rodgers, airing it out in the second half, and running away with it. I definitely think the key to this game, though, is Eddie Lacy establishing that running game early? Obviously, once that run game is established early and going, it opens up the rest of the offense. The play action comes into play. The deep ball threat, whether, it's whether we see it's Nelson or Cobb. You mentioned Jared Cook. He is another X factor in this offense. This offense hasn't been the same since the departure of Jermichael Finley. And they've been missing the big, speedy tight end who could stretch the field, go over the middle, make big plays. I think this is Jared Cook's best career year. This offense in general has the potential to be one of the best it's ever been, one of the best ever in NFL history. As for the Jaguars, though, they are young, up-and-coming team. Blake Bortles did progress last season. I know he's prone to make mistakes, but that offense, he, like you said, Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns, they will definitely be airing the ball out. A good test for the Packers' young secondary, which showed last season that they could compete, which was very, very promising. And also on the defensive end for the Jaguars, very young. They actually have a former Packer in Devon House. They added Malik Jackson from Denver. Drafted Jalen Ramsey. Dante Fowler Jr., who they drafted 2 years ago, will finally be on the field. He suffered an ACL injury, missing his entire rookie year. So it'll be a good game, but similar to you, I think the Packers just have too many weapons, and they win this game 35-20.
Yeah, that's a nice score. And, the other thing, if you force the Jacksonville Jaguars to air it out, the other thing that it'll do is it'll expose that offensive line. And that is a major question mark with Jacksonville. Last year they gave up 51 sacks. And right now, they're trying to incorporate a new left tackle on that offensive line, Kelvin Beachum, who formerly played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is recovering from a significant injury, and I think he only started once in the preseason, so he's still trying to get acclimated to the team, to his fellow linemen, and I think that is going to bode well for Clay Matthews, Julius Peppers, Dayton Jones. You get up on these Jaguars, and then you set those pass rushers free, let them pin their ears back, and we could put Blake Bortles on the run. And I would love to see that in this game.
Absolutely, and I'm definitely excited. You just mentioned Clay Matthews, of seeing, Clay going back to his natural outside linebacker position and just wreaking havoc. And I think that'll also play a big role in this game and the entire season, being able to, attract extra attention on Clay Matthews. That'll help open up everything else for the defensive line to get more pressure on the quarterbacks, hopefully force more turnovers.
Absolutely.
Well, you heard it all here first. That's going to wrap up the first edition of Tundra Talk. Ralph, thanks for joining me. Hope we get to do this again soon.
It's been a pleasure, Joe.
Thank you for listening, and make sure to check out all of our work on Lombardiave.com.